testing. We are live. All right. Just want to make sure the audio is working properly. Okay. Let me jump right in. Hello, everybody. I hope that people had enough time in advance to make it for this stream. I tried to make it a week in advance, pretty much. As you can see on our Discord channel and also on my profile, that's Maddie's profile, you'll also see a calendar of all the different streams and videos that will be released this week. So keep an eye out for that. Okay, and today, for those of you who don't know, we're going to be making a series of biomes or terrain with the fantasy regional style. I just want to make sure that stream is up. Ooh, audio works, but quiet. Okay, let's turn that up. I just turned up the audio. Is that better, Philip? Testing. Let's make sure the audio is up so people can hear it. Okay. Don't want it to be too loud. Don't want to pick up too much interference or anything. Okay. All right. The volume has been set to be higher, so hopefully that works. Okay. So again, today we're going to be doing fantasy regional terrain with the fantasy regional style. We're not going to use any other stamps or textures from different styles. You can, of course. For those of you who don't know, if you go into the description that is below, you'll see that there is a link to a map that you see here that you can follow along. So that way, when we go through, you can just go ahead and create each terrain or biome with me as we go. Okay, the audio is better. Let's just turn it up just a little bit more. Don't want to overdo it. Let's just turn it all the way up. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm just going to dive right in. So in this template, you're going to see that there's a plus and a minus sign. And if you're confused on that, it's that these tiles right here with the lighter brown color are actually made with the add mode, while these darker brown ones are made with the subtract mode. And why did I do this? I did that because that way you can kind of paint each checkered square here without accidentally bleeding onto the other. So if you're wondering what these are, that's why. So I'll do a quick test just so you can see it. So if I have foreground set, it's only going to affect this. So it's just there to make sure that it doesn't blend together. I'm going to undo that. All right. Okay, so let's jump right in first. When you're putting together a biome or a section of terrain, then you usually want to start with a base texture. Now, when you're creating a world map or a regional map that has more than one biome in it, it kind of helps to put down this base texture so that you can compare all the different biomes in your world next to each other. So that way you don't accidentally put, let's say, a tropical jungle right next to a tundra or something like that. So it's good to be aware or to have these base textures for comparison on your world map. And please don't be afraid to ask Philip in our chat if you have any questions, okay? They'll be more than willing to help you. So let's jump right in. We're going to first create a mountain range. Now you're going to want to go to your stamp options or your objects. You can press the O key to open that right up. I definitely recommend that you use shortcut keys. The objective is to speed up your map making process, especially if you're a DM. So make sure to use shortcut keys. You press the O key, open up. You can then also press the F key or click this to open the catalog or the yellow button. So I'm just going to click the F key and it's going to open up the catalog. Everything's going to be here. As you can see, I'm going to want to expand all because I kind of want to see what I'm working with. That's nice. Or you cannot do that if you don't want to spend a long time scrolling through. And if you know exactly what you're looking for, just type it into the search field. Definitely recommend that. So the first one I believe is a mountain range. Let's take a look. Mountain range. Press the F key, open it up, and we're going to pick brown mountains. I'm going to hold down the space bar to pan and then just use my mouse scroll wheel to zoom in. I want to get nice and close to this section so I can see it. And we're going to have to scale down our stamp. Okay. So when you're making a mountain range, think a lot like rivers. Rivers meander, they have S-curves to them. That's the same thing with the way that I do mountain ranges. So when I'm creating a mountain range, I hold, click, and drag and kind of create this S shape like this. You can even go over, that's okay, a little bit like this. And I stick with one size, I'm at 30. What you can also do is scale it down one more, or you can switch over to the smaller mountains. That works too. Let's just go with the same size as 30. And I'm going to create little branches going off, and they're going to start kind of big and then going small. I'm actually going to switch over to the larger ones because I just want to do that. Put one over here, and one over here. And then we'll switch back over to the small ones and just kind of create a little branch that goes off. Also going to switch through them like this. All right, add one here as well. And so this is basically your range from here. And I'm fine with this texture as the base texture. When we go into something a little bit brighter like desert, we're going to want to change it instead of using this brown here. Same thing with jungle, but for mountains this works fine. And from there, after you've made your mountain range, you're going to want to also next add your foothills. So open back up to the catalog. Notice that there are hills here. And you're going to want to zoom back in and scale down your hills. When you are working on a biome or terrain, your mountains are generally going to be that stamp that you use as a scale reference. So everything should be to scale to the mountain. So when I'm putting down my hills, obviously hills at 30 seem a bit big, so we want to scale it down even more. And now this is the part where how realistic do you want it to be? If you're going to go very, very realistic, then you'd obviously think that the hills would be much, much smaller. We're already at the smallest size, which is 10. And we're going to go ahead and just place them along or at the base of the mountains. And you don't have to click and drag. This is one of those things where you want to just do single clicks. You can do a click and drag if you want, but I actually recommend that you place them down one at a time. That way it gives it a more natural look. When it's dragged, it looks a little weird. And also make sure that it's at the same layer. So notice that these mountains are at layer 1, that's right here. You also want your hills to be at layer 1 because they're going to interact with the collision box. So that way the hill is behind the mountain or in front of the mountain. So make sure that you use that same scale. That's super important. We're going to take a look and see. So we've got some nice foothills here. We're probably going to add a couple more. Let's add some here. Okay, and let's add some here. Don't forget, you can follow along with this. This template is in the description below. You could also find it on my profile. That's Matisse profile. Just click the link, open it up, clone, edit, and just go along with what I'm doing. So let's keep up with the mountain range. So once you've added that, you can start working on a texture that's going to blend these stamps in with this base texture. And we're going to go over to the brush tool. You can also click the B key. And you can also press the F key to open up the texture catalog, just like you can open the stamp catalog. So keep that in mind. And we're going to go look through our options, and we're going to want to pick a texture that's going to go well with those mountains and blend with those mountains. This texture looks pretty nice. Now it might not look good on a first swipe, so let's just do it at 100% and then undo it just to see what it looks like. It looks maybe just a tad bit dark, so we're going to hit Control Z, undo that just real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and go to Advanced Settings, and then you have something called Filters. Click, and you're going to have HSBC, and we're going to change our brightness up just a bit, and we can even drop down just saturation a little bit and just apply and look at it. That looks a little bit better. Let's go ahead and undo that. Let's go ahead and check out other textures as well too, just in case, so we don't have to mess around too much. do recall there being some textures that might go fairly well with those mountains. Maybe this one, maybe it's this one. Let's take a look. You know, that one works the best, so let's stick with that. Let's go ahead and do a first pass. And what I'm going to do is just do a little bit, make sure your softness is all the way up. You can use the A and Q keys to move the softness slider bar across, or you can just do it manually like this. Now I'm only going to do one pass. I'm just going to click, hold, and drag, and just put it over like this. Don't go too far out away. Just put it at the very base of the stamps. Don't worry about this because we've made it to where the this is a different layer, so that way it won't accidentally bleed off. Okay, so you've done your first pass. You went along like this, right? And next you're going to go ahead and drop your opacity down to something smaller. And let's try doing a different trick as well. Let's switch over to our edge shape. And I really like the edge shape because the edge shape works great with kind of blending. And you're going to want to make sure that you drop the opacity down quite a bit because there is no softness feature with the edgy brush. So you have to make sure that the opacity is down quite a bit. And also we're going to change how edgy it is. We'll keep it smooth for now. Let's just do one pass just to see what it looks like. I can't see it that well. So we can increase the opacity just a bit more. That looks pretty good. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to go out a little bit farther out like this. It's kind of nice. The edgy shape works really well. And I'm also going to put randomly as well on the outside because it's the transition between this texture and this dark brown texture looks odd. So if you just single click like this around these edges and then just put them out with little dots here like this, what you do is you're creating a transition between those two textures. So the blending is so much better. And of course you don't have to do this. You don't have to do that, but it does help. As you can see, the transition is a bit better. Like this. And then from here, there are a lot of options that we can do. We can add in a forest if we want. There's a lot of things. You've created these little alcoves for you to create points of interest or a forest, things like that. Now, since we have a forest in here, I'm not going to worry about making a mountain forest, but a lot of forests do grow at the base of mountains. And again, if you were to add trees to this, make sure that it is set at the right layer. That's going to be layer 1. Okay, so if you decide to not move on to the next one up to mountain rivers, then you decide to add some trees in here. Make sure again that it is at layer 1 when you add the trees. I'll do a quick example just so you can see it. You open up the catalog, you click tree. I'm just going to do one quick example, and again, make those trees the smallest that you're going to get because we're looking at scale. Even these might be too big, but that's the smallest it gets. I'm just going to show you real quick what I mean by when you set it at the right layer. So if I go like this with trees, it goes behind and then it interacts with the collision box. So make sure again that it's at the correct layer so that the stamps will interact with each other properly. I'm just going to delete that. For now, I'm not worried about making a mountain range with forest, just a mountain range. So it looks like we've reached 194 changes. I'm going to quickly save. For those of you who don't know, that if you don't save and refresh often enough after a certain number of changes, you're going to come across an old data problem, which is going to cause basically an internet timeout. If you're using Chrome, Chrome has megabyte limits on its tabs. So saving and refreshing basically helps with this history right here. Once this history gets very, very full, you'll start experiencing lag or some other type of errors. So be sure to save and refresh the page. Since this is the first save, we don't have to worry about refreshing, but after a number of saves, this thing's going to build up and you're going to see a lot of changes. So then that is at the point where we'll start refreshing. So basically, here's your mountain range. And if you want, you can add like a lake or a river or whatever to this section. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And remember that This mountain lake is on a negative layer, as is with all of these. So this is going to be the subtract mode. This is going to be the add mode. So when you do decide to apply a texture, switch over to the BG. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and take all these mountains and move them over to here. And we're going to be doing some interesting things. Why don't we add both a lake, and we'll add just a little bit of forest in here. So now you understand the mountain range. You can move on to the next step, which is adding a lake into it. So let's do two things. One, let's go ahead and create first the body of water. Since this is the subtract mode, let's go ahead and switch over to the add mode. And I just want to real quickly see what it looks like. It will have a dark black outline on it, so I might have to just texture instead. Yeah, I don't really care for that, so let's undo that. Instead, we're going to go ahead and paint instead. And I should probably real quickly just probably blend these together real quick. Won't take too long. Just follow the same steps as before. And we're going to put our lake right here. And then we're also going to create some headwaters, which is where a lake and a river starts. So we'll get to that as well. Okay, I'm just going to do some quick blending real fast. Check questions real quick. Unfortunately, at this time, there is actually no way to delete the change history within the editor. You do have to save and just refresh. That's a good concept. And if you go to our Discord channel, we actually have a suggestions channel that you can go ahead and leave that suggestion. And once you've left a suggestion, the more thumbs up it gets, the more attention the team will give it. So keep that in mind. Go join our Discord. Also, be sure that you assign yourself the Inkarnator role, because if you don't assign yourself the Inkarnator role, you won't be able to see all the channels within the Discord server, okay? So assign yourself that Inkarnator role when you join the Discord. Philip can leave a link to the Discord in the chat, if you would, please, Philip. Okay. So now that we've blended in our mountains here, let's go straight to adding a lake. I'm going to go ahead and increase the softness. We'll change the brush, actually. We'll make the softness as well 100%, and I'm going to change my brush size. And this lake is going to be fairly big, and it's going to be hugging in this nice little alcove here. And when you're making a lake shape, don't make it too perfectly circular or square. Give it lots of different little edges and bends, and it'd be nice too to actually put it behind a mountain as well, like this, so that way you get a little bit of depth. I definitely recommend overlapping. So this water is behind this mountain. That's kind of nice. Okay. And we're also going to want to think about how this thing also has a headwaters. Now, what are headwaters? Headwaters are basically where a lake or a river starts. So generally there's going to be ice melt or snow melt that happens in the mountains, as well as rainwater, and that collects into small lakes up in the mountains, and then those filter down the mountain, go down the mountain, and they create a stream leading down to a larger body of water, which is where this lake is right here. So we're going to create the headwaters, and we're going to do it without using a texture. Instead, we're going to want to use the path tool. So to access the path tool, click this, or you can click the P key to open the path tool. And one thing I recommend when using the path tool is just immediately putting down a path. And then from there, you can edit it in here like this. So I'm going to click this, select, and I'm going to switch it over to a line. And I'm also going to be turning off the shadows. It's a two-step process. Turn the blur down to 0 and drop this down. And we're also going to want to change the color to fit something more of this color. And I'm going to put it over it so that way I can, when I play with the color, I can see which color works with it best. Okay. That color should do fine. And we can also play with blend modes. But first, let's just go ahead and make our And let's make sure the texture, it's at the right, it's at layer 2. Let's see here. Make sure it's at layer 1. Okay, we'll put it at layer 2. That works. Okay, and we're gonna pick a suitable location for headwaters. So I'm gonna put one just right here, I think, like this. So you're gonna push, hold, drag. We're gonna create a little lake right here like this. And then we're gonna drop the size down, the width, and we're gonna have it go down like this, down, 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 down. And I can't see, so let's move it down. There we go. I'm gonna have to do it again. I want it to be one whole thing, because when I change the blend mode, I want it to interact properly. Have it winding down and go to there like that. That's fine. Okay. And if you want, you can add multiple of these instead of just one. Like if you wanted to add another one, you can put one like, let's say over here, like this. Just have it go down, winding through, up like that. So now you have two. Okay. All right. So now you have your lakes with, these are the headwaters that create this. And also if you wanted to, you could have a lake that goes along here or a river. So let's just quickly add that. I'm going to drop the size down, and the river's basically going to meander like this. Now rivers, why do rivers meander, you might be asking? Well, sediment gets pushed like this. As it bends around, sediment erodes this bank, causing the S shape. And then that same thing happens on the next. The debris pushes across and then widens this edge, eroding this edge. So that's why you want to have these S curves when you are making your rivers. It's called meandering. And again, sediment that is being pushed by the waters goes ahead and erodes each bank. And so then once it erodes this side of the bank, then it pushes all over and does it all over again. And it erodes that bank. So make sure that you absolutely have meandering in this kind of S curve shape, so that way it looks more realistic. Now I'm going to go ahead and save it. I'm at 122 changes, and we want to move right along here. It's already been 20 minutes. We want to get all of these done within this stream, so I'll be picking up the pace a bit. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. We got Philip in the chat. Okay, and I am just going to add some trees in here real quick, so that way you have some vegetation. Normally there's a lot of vegetation. With this mountain range, there's none. Let's go jump over to tree. Make sure it's at the smallest size. Make sure it's set to 1. And I'm just going to put in just a couple randomly. Oopsie, I just remembered that particular path is at 2, so we're going to have to actually move that one, or this cluster, up to 2. There we go. And we're going to have to select this one again because it's at 1. You don't want it all to be at 2 except for here. So I'll just do that real quick. Overlap it. It's always nice to overlap. Same thing there, overlap. Okay. And we're going to go down a layer because we want some to be behind. So right there, so it's behind like this. Okay, and probably put just a few lining around the lake. And don't worry, we'll be sure to add some texture at the base here as well for a little bit of sand. So we'll be doing that as well. Let's quickly do that. Let's add some sand or kind of a beach. We're going to figure out what color we want. Press F key, open up the catalog. Kind of pick the correct texture. This is Parchment Land 2. Let's go with this land texture right here. I'm just going to apply once. There we go. Looks good. And I'm going to leave the softness up and drop the opacity down. Let's go ahead and do another swipe. Okay. All right, let's do one swipe first. You're going to do this all around the edge of the lake. And it's okay if you go a little bit into, oopsie, make sure you don't hit that river though. Oh, don't recommend that. And you don't have to go all the way around, just some spots. because not the whole thing would be shoreline. Some of it might be a cliff. So we'll add some here like this. Okay, so now you have some shore here, and we also want to make it so that the lake looks a bit deeper. So go to your darker textures. Okay, looks like I'm already using that one. So let's go ahead and just change the brightness on this one just a hair. I'm going to change it to 90. Take a look. Oh, that's right, the opacity's low, that's why. Never mind. Okay, there we go. Great. Okay, let's increase the size. And I'm going to go ahead and just only do this into the darkest spots. I'm going to drop the opacity down just a bit too. Only in the darkest spots, so the deep part. And I like to also just drop the opacity and just do, or the size, and just do some little spots here. I'm sure you've noticed I am doing this in 2K. It is kind of hard to both stream record this in 2K, or I'm sorry, in 4K, so sorry about that. Okay. Right, and you'll notice too, there's this problem here with that. So we're gonna have to take all these paths and change the blend modes, which I forgot to do. Really cool pro tip, click paths in the selection, and all you do is just select nothing but paths, so that's very helpful. Just go to blend mode, and we're gonna go through all of them, and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit actually, just so I can kind of see them and see how well they blend. Let's go through the various kinds. We'll see which one goes best. And some of them might not work. Oh, there we go. That right there looks like the best to me. You can kind of still see a little bit there, but that's okay. But I think this one looks pretty good. Okay, looks all right. And that blend mode, by the way, was hue. And that works fairly good. I kind of like that, so that will do. 183 changes, let's save it. We still have a lot to do and not much time, so we gotta be moving real quick. Okay, and I think I will refresh the page as well. Okay, I'm gonna refresh the page. There's been quite a few changes. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next biome or terrain. All right. So there, anyway, that looks pretty good. Maybe we'll add just a little bit of green to this to make it different from the last one. We've got the grass. Make sure it's set to BG. And I'm just going to put some, well, it looks a little bright. Let's go with something a bit darker. Maybe this one right here might work better. Yeah, that looks good. We're just going to put that in here and right here, just to get a little bit of color in there. Okay. Yeah, that looks good to me. Okay. So, next one, let's go over to forest. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm gonna want to pick a base texture for this. It's set to the FG, don't forget, because you have that plus sign, so it's this lighter brown. And I'm gonna go ahead and pick kind of a darker, maybe this, maybe just use that one, maybe this one, and maybe just make it a tad bit darker. You're gonna go to your advanced settings, filters, HSBC, drop the brightness, and I'm gonna turn on the grid. So that way it just fills in the whole thing. Here we go, so I'm set for that. And we're gonna wanna make a forest, and it doesn't have to be to scale with this stuff. This is just an example. So if you want, it can be more of a regional forest instead of a world forest. That's okay. We're gonna use a different tree, and I'm going to use this deciduous tree. I'm gonna drop the scale down. I'm gonna figure out just how big I want it to be. I think that looks about right. So this is gonna be more of a regional, but your world forests on your world can also be the same, so it works for both world and forest, the process that we're going to go through with this. So we've picked our base texture, and now we're going to apply some trees. And if you're doing a world, if you like to label your forest, there is a trick, and I'll quickly show that. So let's say that you want to label a forest and you want to call it, let's say, hardwood, like this, and you want to do a curvature. Just a quick pro tip. Curve it the way you want it, and then go ahead and pick your stamp. And what you're going to basically be doing, let's go ahead and make it to it blends better. Turn off the outline and drop the opacity as well. Make it look all right. So hardwood, and we'll change it to a different. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Flip it around. Okay. So if you want to label your forest, the best way to do it is this way, is to add your label, and then you're just going to drag the trees around it. Make sure you don't actually come in contact with the text. Okay? So just do your first single drag like this. And you know, you can make it as big as you want it. You want it to go all the way out to here, that's fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Go out like this. So you have your forest. And there's your label. The next step is once you finish that main body, then you're going to want to start changing things up and changing the size. So I like to drop the tree size down and just randomly click a couple along the edge here. And we're also going to add bushes and grass as well. And we're going to do more details in here too to cause the transition between this, basically this tree line right here, and this texture and this text. So we'll be putting little trees as well as bushes in there as well. Again, the one thing you don't want to do is accidentally, you know, come over the text like this. And also I would recommend that you put the text at layer -5. Works best. So don't really recommend overlapping that, so don't do that. Okay. And we're going to continue putting them all along the edge. And you can even put little clusters too. I like to do things in 3s, like this. And you can also go back up to the original size that we used, which was 40, and just put a couple random as well. All right. And also, if you're going to apply stamps, and you're also obviously going to want to change up the texture beneath. I like to use a brown, so we can go ahead and just continue with continuity of textures here. I'm going to just turn off the grid and go over to the circular, and I'm going to go ahead and drop the opacity just a bit, and only underneath the trees you're going to add some brown. Don't go too far out and away from it, just underneath the trees. Like this. Okay, just underneath the trees. I'm just doing single click taps where the individual trees are at, just so there's a little bit of brown there. There we go, that's nice. And in the more darker parts, you can drop the brightness down even more. And let's say where it's most dense, it would be darker. So you're going to make it nice and dark in these holes because that's where it's dense. And so you want it to be nice and dark in there. There we go. That's nice. Okay. And we can do some things differently if we want. We can change the text to black if we want. And then we can just brighten the texture inside so that that pops out more. So we look at this, and we'll say, let's say we want it to be a bit brighter. Let's go to filters, go to brightness, boost it up, and go like this. And you can change the opacity of the wood as well. But because this is in the opening, this is technically called a glade, but it's just there for to add the text. And you can increase that opacity. Go up to maybe 50 should be fine. Or maybe even lower. That looks fine. Okay. We'll zoom out, take a look. So that's kind of the quickest way to label your forests. If you don't like that, then just ignore the whole text thing and just fill in that whole area with trees. Know that in the center or the heart of the wood, you're going to have the most density of trees. And also, I do recommend creating a series of glades within your forests, because if you don't have a glade, you're not really going to see, there's not much for POIs that you can put there. So make a glade or two within each one of your forests so there's a little bit of space to put something like a tower or whatever it is that you have in mind. Now we're going to add the last detail by just adding a little bit of grass. And there is a grass texture if you know exactly what you're looking for. Or you can just go to search, or it's right here, it's nice and close. And these are the last bits that I'm going to add, and I'm going to put them in here. I'm also going to increase the brightness. Let me just place it down. Okay, I want it to be just a tad bit brighter. So I'm going to increase the brightness by 10%. There we go. And I'm going to place these just kind of here and there. Start with this first size at 20 in these kind of open areas, and then drop it down to the smallest one. This is what I call a continuity of size issue. When everything's the same size, all these bushes are the same size, it looks weird. So adding an even smaller bush and clusters around it breaks up that. That's very helpful. There we go, here and there. Okay, and we can move on to the next one. There we go. All right. So now you have this nice transition here in the text. 156 changes. Let's save it and move on to a swamp. Not a lot of questions yet. So, thank you, Pina Negra. Appreciate that. By the way, I love your maps. They're fantastic. Okay. Congratulations on the contest, by the way. Okay. So mountain range done, mountain lake done, and forest are done. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is going to be swamp. And we're going to want to go ahead and pick a base texture. And remember, it's going to be on the FG, or I'm sorry, the BG. Apologies. BG, like that. And we're going to switch over to using the grid. And we're going to want to pick kind of a swamp texture. We're going to go look through what we have here. Various grass. Let's see. I want to pick something. I don't think they have a swamp, but I can add it. Let's take a look. No, it does not. So we're going to have to pick a texture of our choice. Let's pick this grass with a little bit of red, and we're also going to change things up. We're going to change the brightness, change the hue, and we're going to apply it. And I'm also going to increase the contrast as well. And the reason why I'm increasing the contrast is to make the textures here pop out more. So I'm increasing the contrast. And it's at 51%. We can go to 100%. There we go. Let's increase the contrast all the way up and drop the brightness a little bit more down. Should work as a fairly decent base. There we go. That looks nice. Let's jump over, jump into the catalog, and there should just be swamp trees since all the trees are nicely put together. You've got jungle and swamp trees. Perfect. All right. So the way that I like to do a swamp, my swamps, is generally I like to place the bodies of water first and then ring the trees around it like I did with this mountain lake. I made the water here first before I put down the trees. I'm going to do that same concept here. Okay, so let's jump over to the brush tool, press B, then press F, and we're going to go ahead and pick a water color that we want. Switch over to brush. This looks a little bright, so we're going to maybe drop the opacity down, and we're also maybe going to increase the saturation, and maybe even contrast, just to give it a little more character. Drop the opacity. We're going to do a test swipe. Oh, I think we can go up a little bit more. Let's go with maybe closer to 60. Oh, I can go probably even more than that. Let's go to 70. That should be enough. And instead of like a lake where you're making one body of water, you're going to make a series of bodies of water. And the way that I do it is I'll kind of make these weird shapes. So you got one right here like this, and then you add another one here, and you just keep adding just little bits of shape of water, and you're going to end up ringing these bodies of water with trees and leave some open areas. Don't completely cover it to where every square inch. You want room to put trees, vegetation, and things like that. So we're going to leave a little open area. Okay, just keep adding them here and there. And we can change the brightness and then also go into here and make it darker in the center. I'm going to drop it down, drop the size. Let's go down to even more than that. Okay, there we go. Perfect. These are kind of deeper sections of it. Okay. Don't have to do a lot of details, just kind of giving it. And we'll be messing around with this too. We'll change things. Okay, going real quick. All right. Zoom out, take a look. All right. If it doesn't look good, don't worry, we can change things around. So let's just apply, because your first pass of textures might not fly. So it's okay to switch them around to match with the stamps. This is just a start. So let's just see here. This looks about the right size. You can make it bigger if you want. Let's go to 50. And like I said, you're just going to go ahead and ring trees around, and don't ring them. Don't ring it entirely. Just kind of randomly, you know, like click, click, click here. You don't want to ring an entire one. Let's see what happens when you ring an entire one. It kind of looks unnatural, so don't do that. Okay, when you're ringing it up, just make sure that you have some in the back and a couple in the front so that they're overlapping. And you're going to want to mess with that size issue. I'm just going to do 1 or 2, and we'll go ahead and drop the size down. So now we're going to go down one more size, just add some smaller ones. And again, we can change the water up. Oops, did not mean to click that. Accidents are going to happen. Tell you right now. Okay. No matter how good you are, you're always going to make mistakes. Okay. All right. Well, overall, I would say that I like the setup where the trees are, but the ground texture just doesn't match at all. So we're probably going to change that up, and then I'll change up these as well. So we're going to go through a series of changes. We're going to see what looks best. Let's go with, I'm going to go ahead and use this Wasteland brown. And you say, why am I using this? Well, I can tell you right now, I am going to go ahead and change the color. I'm going to boost the saturation. Actually, let's drop the saturation down. Changing the hue. Okay, and I'm just going to do a swipe on the ground here and just kind of see how it looks. There we go. That is much better. Perfect. All I did was just drop the opacity of this. I changed this with the advanced settings, with changing the hue and the saturation, and then I dropped the opacity so that way this color stays. Let me also make it the edges there. So that this way this color will interact with all this. Instead of setting it at 100%, if I had done it at 100%, it would have covered everything up and it wouldn't have looked good. I wanted it to interact with the texture that I already had, okay? All right. Okay. I just saw a question there. I'll go ahead and answer this. Okay, interesting. All right, we'll address that shortly. Philip, if you can get to that, because we're running short on time. I still have 4 more to work on. Oops, I realized I went over there a little bit. Okay, so we've got this so far, and I think I am going to use some more stamps to create more transition between this watery section right here, and I think the swamp fronds would probably work best. So you have them right here, swamp fronds under the foliage and water tag, and you're going to want to make sure they're small. Let's go with 20, and I am going to ring them around and make sure they're the right layer. I am going to ring them, but not the entire time, or the dragging and clicking the whole time. I'm going to release. And they're really hard to see. I understand they're at 2K. Maybe in the next stream I can get that to work out with 4K. But you're just kind of lining around like this. Let me go ahead and open this in 4K shortly. Just line this around like this. And we're also going to create transition as well. So there's not just this line of swamp fronds. You'll click here and there so there's more transition. And I'm going to go ahead and save and refresh and probably open this map in 4K, and I'll show you how to do that. And I don't recommend that you use 4K unless you have a fairly powerful machine, because there will be a lot of lag. So keep that in mind, particularly if you have a high object count. So let's just save real quick, and then we'll go ahead and move on, and I'll start getting this set up. Okay. I'm going to quickly just go out of this map, go into my maps on this dummy account that I'm using for the stream. Okay. We're going to go back. Okay. And we're going to say, so once you're at your My Maps, okay, you're going to click, you're going to go onto it, make sure your mouse is dragged over like this so these options show up. You're going to click these three dots here, go to Open Resolution Ultra 4K. Make sure you read this little disclaimer here. 4K editing requires a lot of RAM and video memory and may not work on every system. In some cases, it may lead to browser tab crashing and losing unsaved work. If this happens to you, please use the recommended editing resolution of 2K. Okay, so open map at 4K. After you've read this, there's information here too. You can read that. Open the map at 4K. Now we're going to see a much better editing resolution, so you'll be able to see everything better. I am working with very small stamp sizes, basically 10 and 20 and 30 at 20K, at 2K, sorry, not 20K, at 2K are going to be very difficult to kind of see. So let's go ahead and change that. Okay, and just so you know, at 4K will also take longer to load, so just keep that in mind as well. So let's just kind of go over it and just see what it looks like in 4K. You can see that the editing resolution is much nicer. You can see these a little bit better. Same thing, you can see these just a little bit better. They are super small, so they will be difficult to see. So let's click these stamps, these swamp fronds, and we're going to click and just randomly place them around like this, especially where the swamp fronds are already at. So this way you don't have these weird looking lines. And we're also going to do some final texturing. We're going to add in some brown in these open spaces. So after we've kind of added the swamp fronds. And don't forget to overlap, put some in front of trees, like there already is here, one there, like in front of that tree. Because again, overlapping is super important to creating that illusion of depth. So keep that in mind. And wherever else you see a line of these swamp fronds, just go ahead and add a couple there, and there, some there. Put some behind the trees as well. That's kind of nice, more depth. Okay. Now we've added all our swamp fronds, and we're going to add one more element, and that's going to be basically adding some brown to it. We're going to open up the catalog. Don't forget, shortcut keys, press F. Press B to access the brush tool, F to open up the catalog, so don't forget that. And I'm going to go down and kind of look for brown textures. This grass brown one might work okay. Let's first just apply a swipe and just see what it looks like on the canvas. I always recommend that you test out a swipe first just to make sure that it looks right. Oopsie, and we also want it to be on the correct layer, don't forget. You can also switch through layers with the 1 and 2 key. If you look carefully, I'm switching. So shortcut keys to switch between FG and BG. This also applies as well to the mask tool. If you press 1, 2, it will switch over. Oh no, it doesn't. I'm sorry. Let me switch over. Yeah, no, it's just with this. So if you're texturing and you want to quickly switch over to the FG and the BG, instead of clicking these, you just press 1 for FG, 2 for BG. And I'm going to go ahead and apply some brown here. It does seem a bit bright. So let's go ahead and just edit it with the filters, the HSBC, and drop the brightness down. Let's take it down to 70 and just kind of see how it works, and maybe even drop the opacity. Okay. Yeah, and you're just going to take the negative space where there are no trees or any water and just make them brown. And this is going to make it look to where there is some contrast between the trees and the stamps, because right now there's a lot of green going on. The only brown there is basically the tree trunk, and even then those look like they kind of blend in with this green. So this brown right here is really going to help to differentiate between, let's say, the water, the ground, because these two greens are close to each other. This brown fixes that problem. So you want to be very careful about your textures and when you choose them. I'm going to add that brown, and I'm going to add that everywhere outside of the swamp as well. So if you have a lot of negative space here, just increase your brush size. I'm going to put it here like this. That's still going to help with making sure that those trees aren't blending so much, because there are problems that you run into with textures blending too well with stamps. So the way to fix that is to introduce a new texture that will break that up. And that's what we've done here with this brown texture. So now you kind of you can see the difference between where the water is and what is ground, which is this brown kind of area you're going to walk through. And there are some other things that you can add if you'd like to. I'm pretty sure we have some, this looks like I'm just going to apply real quick and see what it looks like. Increase the opacity. Okay, and you can also add this alpha here. And it's called Swamp. I believe it's actually made for parchment, but it's been included. But this will add some little bit more texture to your ground. So definitely use this Swamp Alpha. I believe it's called Swamp. Just go in the search field, into the catalog, and you're going to add a little bit of this. And since it's an alpha, every time you do a click, it's going to keep increasing it. So if I just do one pass, you're going to notice that it's not very present. You can't see it. But if you apply it again after a click, it will get darker. So I would definitely recommend making some sections darker than others. So that way you have some transition, because if it's all this dark, it's going to look weird. So just adding it, not being so dark in these corners and some edges here will look kind of nice. It's just adding a little bit more texture. And that's kind of nice because you really want these things to pop out. Okay, I think that will do. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. All right, yeah, that looks fine. There's a lot of other things that you could do, but this is just kind of the basics. Just starting with your base texture, adding a stamp or your body of water. It just depends on what you're doing. If you're making a swamp, I definitely recommend making your bodies of water first before you apply the trees. So, and if the texture doesn't work, again, just like we just did in this video, you can change that by just picking a new texture and dropping the opacity and applying it over it so that the color scheme works. We're at 108 changes. We got 4 more biomes and terrain to do, and we have to do it in just over an hour. So let's get that started. Let's save. Check the live stream. Interesting. Yeah, we don't actually have a feature to make the textures go in a straight line. I know Photoshop has that option, but that is a really cool idea. Honestly, more than anything, I would like to see a straight line in the path tool, because I think that would be extremely useful. Okay. All right, so we've got 4 more to go. We're going to go with desert. Okay, so I do believe that this is going to be a BG again because it's darker. Let's just apply to make sure I understand that. Yeah, that looks right. Just want to make sure that I have it right. Yep, that's right. Okay, so desert. Now when we're doing our desert, we're going to go ahead and open up our catalog, and we're going to go through all the various textures. This looks like a desert 1. Okay, let's go ahead and just apply that. We're going to use the grid tool. Okay, all right, that looks good. And so a little bit about deserts. Deserts are generally wedged in between 2 large mountain ranges. They can connect to the sea. It just depends. As a rule of thumb, your deserts are not going to be anywhere near the poles. They're going to be closer to the equator. That's basically going to be where the sun is hitting, has the most exposure on the on the Earth or whatever your planet is. At least that's Earth physics. So if you want it to look realistic and related to Earth physics, your deserts are likely going to be closer to the equator. Obviously, you know, physics can be different in your world. We are working with fantasy, so deserts could be at the pole if it wanted to. It just depends. If you're going to do all that stuff, make sure that you explain that, obviously, about your map. So let's just stick with Earth physics for now. And again, your deserts are going to be near the equator where there's the most exposure to sunlight. And they will generally be in between two sets of mountain ranges, or they can go out to the ocean. I do believe the Sahara does. It hits up with the ocean. So it's not necessarily that you have to have two ranges to make a desert. So, but it is a good place to start. Now, I don't have to add ranges, mountain ranges, if you don't want to, but we can put them in there. Let's just go ahead and quickly make some real quick mountain ranges. And I'm going to use some very small mountains. I don't want to spend too much time. You understand how to make mountain ranges. I've explained that up here. So I'm just going to make two real quick ones, and then we'll make a desert that's in between it. You're going to click and drag and do that S-curve. And I'm not worried too much about making it perfect, since you guys already understand how mountains work. The question now is, how do deserts work with mountains? So let's go ahead and apply that. This is just kind of these small little mountain ranges. And I'm going to drop down the size so there's some transition. Okay, so here's our mountain ranges. And your desert's going to be in between here. Okay, let's just imagine that that's where it's going to be. Let's go ahead and move these up this way a little bit. Okay. So let's move this over even more. So this area right here is where your desert's going to be. And we are going to want to actually play with our textures. We're going to want to blend that in a bit. So let's go ahead and pick a texture that works best. This one does work fairly well. I'm going to drop my size, bring the brightness up, and change the opacity, since the difference, in contrast, the difference is this is so dark. This brown is so intense. It will look really weird if I have it at 100% opacity. So dropping it down a bit works better. You're going to do this the first pass, just like up here. Just going to kind of cover the base like this. Same thing with this one. And we will have to change it to where this texture is brown as well, by the way. Obviously, there's no desert here. The desert's going to be in between these mountains. So we'll just add a little bit of brown here so that makes that clear. Same thing here. You can even do it like this a little bit here. Okay, and just changed it up here as well. So just where that yellow space is where our desert's going to be. And we're going to do another pass here. It's going to be a little bit darker because it's got a lower opacity and it's already got some texture there. And do it on here as well, just so it blends in. And you can also drop that opacity. And I like to do these little dots, and what these dots do is just kind of creates some transition. You don't have to do this. You can use the edgy brush instead if you want. I'll show you that. So here's the edgy brush. We're going to drop it down to, let's say, 40. Smooth, we're going to drop it down to 8. And we'll even increase this size just a hair. You can go like this. So it's actually a bit easier to do the edgy brush. If you want to do it quicker, the dots is a bit of a slower process. So I won't do that. Instead, I will use this. And you'll see that it does kind of create some transition, which is nice. Edgy brush works good. Okay. And you'll notice it's a little bit darker on these edges. That's okay. We can go ahead and increase the size and just do it all over here. Like this. Okay. That's fine. Okay. All right, there we go, looking good. All right, okay. Oh yeah, let's add last one right here. There we go. Okay. Just want to make sure the transition looks good. There we go. Okay. Definitely recommend the edgy brush. Works great. So as you can see, there's some transition there. That's nice. We can also drop it down to 1 opacity and 1 size and just single click like this. I'm still going to do this just a little bit because I still think there needs to be more transition. Sometimes the edgy brush won't be enough. And this is just a matter of personal preference, so you don't have to do this. It just depends how much detail you want. Just know that if you want your map to look good, it will require more details and therefore more time. There is unfortunately no magic trick to making a map that looks absolutely amazing in a short period of time. That's just not possible. So instead, what you should aim for is speeding up your process. And the way that you speed up your process is by understanding the tool and having an order of operation. Oh, that's important. And I always use an order of operation. Okay, looks like I've done a lot of changes, so let's just go ahead and save. Okay. All right. Thank you, Philip, for answering all the questions in the chat. Appreciate it. All right, we're saving. And we're going to go ahead and start working on the desert by adding some stamps. Where are we at here? Okay. 11 a.m. PDT. Okay, we got about an hour, or as long as the stream will take. We'll finish it once I finish all of these biomes. Okay. So now that you've added that, let's zoom in here. Don't forget, you can zoom in using your scroll mouse wheel. Hold down spacebar to pan. Okay, that's super important. And then we're going to go ahead and press the O key to open up the object menu, the stamp options, and then press the F key to open the catalog. And we're going to go ahead and click these dunes. You're going to see 2 different kinds, your dunes long and your dunes short. We're going to stick with short. And we're going to go ahead and size them down. Again, as always, your mountains are going to be your scale. So I'm going to make these fairly small. And I'm going to be making an S-curve with these. And I believe these are draggable. So go ahead and just do one little S-curve like this. And we're going to do a bunch of them like that. Okay? And we are going to change things up because this is not permanent. Okay, add a dune there. And we're also going to add some smaller ones. And just some random ones here and there as well, branching off. That's fine. Okay, that works fine there too. Okay. And if you feel that these do not go well with this texture, there are some nice tricks that you can do. You can go into this search bar right here, type in dune, select all matching. So all my dunes are selected. And you can go over to your blend mode and just switch over to luminosity. And what luminosity does is it picks up the texture of the stamp that is beneath the stamp. Okay? And if you feel that that's still not enough, there are things that you can do. You can change the contrast. You can boost the contrast up, or you can drop it down like that if you want it to just show like this. So there are various options that you want to go with. I'm just going to go ahead and drop the contrast down just a bit so that it kind of matches a bit better, and that's just the way it is. There is a sand texture that works well with these dunes specifically, and that's okay if you want to move forward with that. That's okay. Me personally, I like to break things. I like to use HSBC because not everything is exactly the way you want it. So you're going to have to learn to finagle and change things around. And of course, you can always make great maps out of the box, but just me personally, I like using HSBC. Okay, so we've got our dunes here. There's some continuity to it. And we might want to say, let's say that we want to add an oasis. And I like the idea of an oasis, so we're going to end up picking a color that we want, or texture that we want, and I'm going to go with kind of a watery green color. I think this one might work well. And we're going to increase the opacity. Let's make it 100%. And I'm just going to apply one across just to see how it looks. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's drop the opacity down just a hair to 67. And I'm going to look for a nice open spot where it's negative. So here and here, here, or here. right here, to me, this looks like the best spot. And again, just gonna do your first stroke. I'm not gonna make it too big. It's an oasis. It doesn't have to be massive. Okay, and we're gonna do another one. Another stroke inside like this. There we go. And we might want to add it, make it a little bit darker. So let's go ahead and change the brightness and drop the size down to 2, and then just add some dark spots in here like this. This is where it's the deepest. Okay. And obviously, since there's some vegetation, it's green, so there might be some vegetation. Let's pick a texture that's gonna go well with yellow. So I've got this land yellow, that's what it says, land yellow. You can also show titles here, by the way, which is fairly useful when you're looking for textures. I don't ever use show titles when looking through stamps, but with textures, sometimes it's nice to have those labels there so that you know what something is called. So the next time that you use a texture, you say lava orange, you know where it is. Or, of course, you can also just favorite it. You can click right here, save to favorites. You'll see a favorites tab here. So since I'm making various different landscapes and stuff, I don't really need to favorite it, but I would definitely recommend that you do that, favorite it. So let's go over to that grass that's kind of yellow, just a hair. I thought I saw it here somewhere, this political yellow, there it is. Okay, let's just go ahead and do one pass around like this and just kind of see what that looks like. And this is basically where green and vegetation is. That's why we're adding it. Because usually in an oasis, you're going to have actually some vegetation and some green because there's water. And again, I'm doing those single clicks to kind of create this transition. Okay. All right, I'm just using textures here instead of FG and 4G FG layers. So and the reason why I'm doing that is because I have an outline that's thick black like this. If you can use the add mode and the subtract mode, and that's easy to do too. You would just use the add or subtract mode and make your shape. And a lot of this transitional stuff could be done with that. But because I have these lines here like this, I'm just going to texture. So, but the same texturing techniques apply as if this was set to a different layer. So it doesn't really change anything. So just know that. And then finally, we're going to have to add some palm trees, kind of iconic to an oasis. And they should be right here under palm trees. And they're probably going to be very small. These seem kind of large, and that's okay. If you have, technically this is huge, but it's okay at the same time. Keep in mind that when you're making a map, if something is perfectly to scale, at the same time, you might have to drop something below this 10 mark because there are these bars right here that let you go smaller, but this comes with a caveat, okay? That if you go below like this, below this 10 scale, this will not come out even in 8K perfect, okay? Because you've gone below the scale limits of what the tool can render at the highest rendering, highest export. So I very rarely recommend that you set something below or above. So like a below 10 or above a 500, which is the max. If you go above that, then you might not render at the best, but for sure I know that if you go below 10, the render is going to be a little off. So just be careful. But also know this, that when you're making a POI, which is a point of interest on a map, sometimes it's okay to actually have the POI or that spot out of scale because you want it to be out of scale. That contrast of out of scale makes the viewer look at it and says, oh wow, this is much bigger, and so therefore it's standing out. And obviously the creator wants me to zoom in on that specific location because of the scale contrast. So sometimes it's okay to do that. I think here is a good example of why it's okay. We can just go ahead and add a couple along the water. I like to bunch them together. So make sure you're set to random stamp, by the way. So that way when you click one, it's random. So I put some in a cluster here, one there, there's a cluster here. Definitely overlap them. And again, these are rather large palm trees. I understand it's huge, but this might work well because I want this oasis. Clearly, it's the thing that pops out the most in this desert. So the scale Inconsistency is actually okay, but it's always a matter of preference. Okay, so you don't have to make it everything to scale perfectly, but at the same time you can if you would like to as well. If you want it to be closest to scale, if that's your style preference, then do that. Okay, so it's not really a big deal whether you do it or not. That's just really up to you. It's really a matter of personal preference. Okay, so we've added some trees around like this, and I actually might even want to change up these palm trees. Click in palm. Oopsie. Well, there's no such thing as a dune palm, but click palm. I'm going to select all, and I'm actually going to change the contrast on these so that it kind of looks like there's some heat distortion. And let's go ahead and increase the brightness as well. Actually, let's go ahead and change the contrast up and just increase the brightness. There we go. Want it to be just a tad bit brighter. There we go. That's better. We're at 82 changes. Let's save that. Okay. Okay. I realize that those mountains on this desert panel looks kind of odd, but again, I did try to focus more on the desert part, but this is something that you, as you're following along, can add more details to this kind of mountain part. All right, we're making good time. We're taking about 15-20 minutes each on each panel, for each panel, so that's not bad. Okay, move that over. So next comes a jungle. This is going to be fun. A jungle is somewhat similar to a swamp. In my mind, I'm probably not going to have a lot of this water here. With a jungle, it's going to be different. So let's go ahead into our brush tool, press B key, press F key, and we're going to start with that order of operation. We're going to start with picking a base texture. Let's figure out which one we want to use. I don't know if there is a jungle texture. It doesn't look like that there is. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So let's go pick with a green. Jungles are obviously very, very green. I'm going to go ahead and pick grass 2, and I'm going to be changing up the saturation, and I'm also going to be dropping the brightness. Excuse me, apologies. And I'm going to switch this up to be a little bit greener. Actually, let's drop the opacity, the saturation down. About there should be good. Okay, oops, I'm getting some glitching there. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. Well, first let's save this, cancel. Let's save this texture. When you are working with a, just as a quick pro tip, when you're working with a texture that has been changed in the advanced settings, like placement and filters, you probably do want to favor it. And the reason why that is because your recently used tab, it can only hold so many. So if you've used 12 textures and this texture goes away, it will be out of this recently used section right here, it will be gone, then you'll have to readjust those placement and filter HSP settings. So if you are going to mess with a lot of textures and you're going to change a lot of them, be sure to favorite them, because that way you don't have to go back and redo all the settings again. That's a total pain and I don't recommend it. So let's go ahead and save that because I've made that change, and then I'm going to refresh the page because it's bugging out a bit. Okay. We're going to save, we're going to refresh. We're going to move on to our jungle, to the grassland and a river, which we've already kind of covered somewhat river already with that mountain lake, but we'll go over it more in depth in that last panel. All right, saved. Let's refresh. Okay. Hopefully that favorite texture will be there. And we can go ahead and start working on our jungle. Just keep in mind that if you are loading a map in 4K, it will take longer to load, okay? Just keep that in mind. It's the same thing with saving. If you have a map that's made in 4K, in the 4K editing, and you go to press the save button, it's going to take a little bit longer to save. So just kind of keep that in mind, okay? All right, let's move on to jungle. We do have our favorites right here, bingo, and we got to make sure that it's set to the right layer. Oops, sorry, FG, my bad. Here we go. Oops, and let's drop it down one tile at a time. Okay, this texture might not be the one we end up using, but that's okay. It's nice to have some kind of texture, to have that base texture there so that you can work with it or change it. So let's go jump right in. Oopsie, let's go over to object. So we're gonna go press the O key, press F key to open up the catalog, and we're gonna look for jungle trees. Let's just go ahead and put one down and see how it looks. See, there's obviously a very big difference between this kind of green and this, so some changes will be made. And I just want to let you know that making forests, whether it's a jungle or a deciduous forest or a pine or a conifer or whatever, the process is generally the same. So let's go ahead and drop down the size. Let's go down to, let's say 50 should be okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a series of sections that are going to be basically glades so that you can go in. Generally, jungles are very, 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 very dense. So it's actually really hard, but we're going to add a couple jungle quote-unquote glades just so that you can put some POIs in there or have a section that's less dense. So let's go ahead and jump in with that. We're going to put in our trees first. And we're just going to create some, what we're going to do is we're just going to create some globs. So you have the glob here and then a glob here. These kind of dense sections, right? You have one dense section, another dense section, another little dense section over here, a little cluster over here, here, and one there. Okay. So you have that. And then we're also going to make just a couple along the edge here of each one. So one there, there, there. It's kind of basically random, kind of helping with that transition so they're not this super weird kind of just, ooh, there's these weird patches of trees. It looks really weird. So when you add these little single trees, that'll break that up. And same concept, you can drop them down a size or two if you want. That's usually what I do. And I'm probably going to change this base texture. Okay, add some there and there. Okay, this looks all right. Okay. Push one back there. This one can go in the back. Just gonna maneuver things around just a hair. Can even move these around. Okay. All right, that looks all right. Let's go ahead and change up our base texture. Let's go over this grass right here. Okay. Okay, let's change up that a bit. So I'm gonna think about maybe increasing the saturation, maybe dropping the brightness on this one, maybe even changing view. There we go. Let's try that. That looks a little bit better. Okay, there we go. That's slightly better. Yeah, that looks much, much better actually. Okay, so it's that same concept we did here. We're gonna add some brown underneath here. So we're gonna switch over to a brown texture. Let's go with something a bit darker this time than what we've been working with. This land brown one maybe. We'll take a look. Let's add this density brush. We'll drop down how edgy it is. And again, you want to drop that opacity down quite a bit. Nothing too crazy. I'd say, let's say 35, 36 should be fine. We're going to apply one across. Okay, doesn't seem like that's enough. Let's double that. Let's try this. Nope, go even more, I think. Should be fine. Okay. Increase our size, and again, remember when you're applying this, you don't have to put it everywhere, just put it underneath the trees. Okay, you're doing one swipe, don't let go, just hold, click, hold, drag under each one like this. And this is kind of again creating that transition between the base texture And this kind of creates the illusion of shade, a little bit of dirt. Not everything has to be covered in grass, so we're going to do that, like that. And we're going to increase this all the way up, and we're also going to drop the size down. Remember, these sections in here should be a very dark brown that represents kind of the denser parts. And we're going to add a lot more grass too. We're going to add a ton of grass in here and probably fill this out even more. Technically, a jungle would be so dense that you wouldn't even see a lot of this ground space here. But just for the sake of putting POIs and stuff in, it kind of helps, because if it's just a thick, dense jungle, there's no place to put POIs, or you could just put a label in the jungle. So it's okay. It just depends on how detailed you want to go with. That's entirely up to you. So for this one, I'm just going to put grass textures everywhere so that this kind of fills up with grass texture. And I might even add more trees, because we want to create a technically a really, really thick canopy, so we can fill out these sections more as we go. First, let's go ahead and check out some of our grass. We have them here, and I might even want to make them kind of large. We'll see. I'm just going to go ahead and put in a bunch and just kind of see what it looks like. And if it doesn't look good, we can change it up. Things can't be different. It's okay. Okay, and I'm also going to drop the size down. Looks about right. And I'm going to do the same thing, just put them in here like this. Okay, because you definitely want to get some grassland in there. Okay, and let's go ahead and select. Let's take a look. This is all grass right here. I think there's some grass in here too, so we don't want to select those. Oops, don't want to accidentally select that. Okay, some grass here. Let's try selecting a bunch of these grass real quick and kind of just exploring a little bit. They all look relatively the same, so I kind of want to find a way to fix that. So I'm going to make sure that none of these trees are selected. There are some jungle trees that are selected, and I don't want to do that, so let's unselect those. Okay. Advanced settings, there's a couple things we can experiment with. You can change luminosity, which I kind of want to do. Just to some of them, not all of them. Just a couple. Change these to luminosity so that I can pick up some of that ground texture, because I really like that. This kind of creates more blending in there. Okay, yeah, I like that. We might even want to add some more brown in right here as well, in these sections. Okay, and I'm going to take this grass right here. Don't want to select those trees, that's an error. Copy, paste them. We're going to put them in around, let's say, put them in here like this, and we'll put another one in like this. Put in a couple there, and I'm going to change the brightness on these as well. Okay, here we go. We're kind of getting our jungle together. We can even add just a little bit of bodies of water in there just for fun. So if we want, we can add our water kind of gray, and I'm going to change it to the size, decrease actually this, and we're going to put just a little bit of water in, I think. Not a whole lot, just like this, randomly put them in. This is not a swamp, it's just little bits of fog and water. Okay, there we go. So there's that. Okay, nice. And this also kind of creates some lighter colors, which creates some contrast against these trees, because everything's so dark. So this light water texture kind of adds some contrast, which is super nice. Okay. Zoom out, take a look. All right. Let's go ahead and save 114 changes. I think this is pretty good so far. You could add lots of other things. There's some other textures that can be added. For instance, I think there should be grass. Let me just take a look. There's this parchment texture, but it is in here and it might work well. Let's go ahead and put it on 100% and check out the size to make sure that we know how big it is. About that size looks right. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply it like this in these open areas right here like this. Just apply it in these open spots. And remember, the more times you click over it, they will get darker. So this kind of adds some kind of grass to these open spaces like this, which is going to be nice. So you got some grass there and some grass there. There we go, nice, okay. Add just a little bit more detail to it, which is nice. We want to have a little bit of detail. We'll add one more right here. There you go, nice. You could also add hills as well as if you wish. So let's go into hills, and you can pick any hill that you really want. I'm going to make them small, like mounds, and I'm going to change the blend mode to luminosity because I want them to pick up that ground texture. So let's go ahead and change the size. I'm going to be very strategic about where I kind of place these hills. And I'm also going to change a little bit of the options with them too. So I will fix that. So let's go in. Okay. Now you have those hills there, and we're going to change them up. They're a little bright for my taste. So we're going to select all the hills we just placed, and we're going to drop the brightness. Maybe even change the contrast a bit. Make the lines a little bit more faded. You see, if I drop the contrast all the way down, this looks like a blur, but if I drop the contrast to where the line work isn't super dark, so you can see the line work is a little bit dark here, but dropping the contrast kind of helps with that, so it's a little bit lighter, and those hills blend in much, much, much better. Let's go ahead and change or save at 135 changes. Okay, sweet. Okay. So far, so good. We're averaging at 15 minutes a biome, so we've got 2 more to work on. Thankfully, the next one is super easy. Grassland is a cake to make. It is not very difficult. You just really need to apply some textures and a few stamps here and there. You don't need a lot. The grasslands are generally flat, like a prairie or a Great Plain. So let's go with grassland. We're going to switch over. This is going to be on the BG, so I'm going to click the B for the brush tool and click 2, the 2 key to switch over to the background. We're just going to make sure that that is correct. So we're going to pick a texture, put it down, and make sure that it's correct. Perfect. Press Control Z to undo. Okay, let's go ahead and zoom in with our mouse scroll wheel. And then you hold down the space bar and use our mouse to move it and center it up to where I can see it better. And we're going to want to pick our texture. So I'm going to open the catalog, press F, and let's go ahead and look at our different kind of grassland textures here. I'm just going to go ahead and use the grid, fill in these spots here. There we go. This texture will do just fine. Looks kind of nice. Let's take a look. It doesn't really blend too much with the others. Perfect. Okay, so grassland. Grasslands is going to be relatively flat. You might have some hillocks, rolling hills, small ones, not too much. I don't recommend adding any mountains in your grassland, at least not in the center parts. You can encase a grassland with mountains around it if you wish, but there's not very many mountains in the main body of the grassland. You really just need to add a couple trees here and there in small patches. I don't recommend making any massive forests unless you want a large forest. So I'm going to use a mixture of trees for this. I'm going to be using both deciduous and coniferous trees. And I'm going to bunch them together. So you have, let's say, a couple coniferous trees here. I'm sorry, deciduous trees. Maybe add a couple solo ones out and about. And then we can also do the same thing here. We're going to add a couple of these. Drop the size down. We're going to do that continuity of size issue. Put a couple here, there, like this. And we're also going to add our grass. And I'm also going to change it to where it's set to luminosity. I want it to pick up that ground texture. And you're just going to place them here and there, because these are large grass tufts. And we are going to be adding that alpha texture that we did in jungle to this as well. I'm going to put those in the negative space. And I'm going to put a large cluster of trees here. Actually, let's add a weeping willow instead. If we just add one different tree and make this kind of a POI, a natural POI. So we're going to go look for the, I don't see it. Where is it? Okay. There it is, willow trees. I'm gonna zoom in, kind of pick the right tree that I want. I kind of like this big one. So we're going to put one willow right there, and we're also going to kind of put some grass around it. If you want, you can even have it make it kind of look like it's ringing it. I don't recommend dragging and making a perfect circle, but kind of the suggestion of a circle. So that way it kind of looks like it's ringing this. And we're going to add these little grass tufts around these trees, so that there's some transition. Even around these coniferous trees is fine. Okay, there you go. So it's very sparse. Grassland is going to be, as the name implies, mostly grass. So don't worry about trying to make it to where there's a lot of vegetation going on. So let's go ahead and move to the next step. We're going to also do our texturing. So I'm going to choose a darker version of this grassland right here. So I'm going to drop the brightness down just a bit, and I'm also going to use that edgy brush again because it looks so nice. And we're going to drop the size down. Let's just go ahead and do one pass and just see how it looks. Okay, that looks a little dark, so let's change the opacity. Let's go to 24. That's okay if it's not super dark at first. We can do more than one pass. If you don't want to do more than one pass, then just increase the opacity. Let's see here. We might want to even go with even more. I just don't want it to be too dark. Okay, this right here will be fine. There we go. And I'm going to do this underneath all the stamps, even little clicks. The computer's lagging just a bit, so I got to give it a second. Okay. Perfect. Just little single clicks so that there's some transition. Okay, same thing. All of these. Add that texture. And this is a common thing that I do, by the way. When I'm doing this, is I'll use this base texture and then just drop the brightness underneath it to create the illusion of both shade and just a different kind of grass going on. So that's kind of nice to do that. You can also just use brown. I'm going to use green this time. I've been using lots of brown. Let's instead go with just a little bit of green. Again, those single clicks to break up the transition. That, swear to God, that edgy brush does miracles, so get used to using it. It's really quite nice. If it's not in the style that you like, that's okay. You can always just go with the edge or a non-edge brush with the softness up, because that also works. Okay, now let's also go ahead and change things up one more time. This grassland, this tree is a bit bright. I'm going to drop it down just a bit more. Okay, and the one thing we're also going to do is we're going to change up this texture. Let's go to filters. We're going to increase the brightness and we're going to increase the contrast as well. And we're going to do that same thing. We're going to go ahead and fill in the negative space like this. Okay, that looks a little too much. Let's bring it down. Let's try 28. There we go. That works a little bit better. And I'm just doing this in the negative space where there is no stamps, okay? So keep that in mind. There we go. So in those negative spaces, you have that other color, that other texture, so that kind of makes that pop out. And the last thing that we want to do is we want to add this grass. So let's go ahead and play with the placement, go with size, make sure the opacity is all the way up. And I'm not going to use that brush. I'm just going to use the circle brush. Let's go ahead and zoom in, and we're going to start adding that grass texture. Let's do one pass, just cover everything in the negative space where you basically applied that brighter green. You can't see it yet, but you will. So now let's apply another pass. And so that grass alpha is starting to pop out even more, which is nice. You want to see that grass. It is a grassland. And I'm just going to do it in all the spots, kind of in single spots here, and just make it super dark. There we go. So you can kind of see that. All right. Let's go ahead and zoom out, take a look. It does seem to me that these are still super dark in comparison to this texture. So I think really we should probably add some brown in there. So let's go ahead and switch over to this grass red right here, and we're going to go ahead and go with this, and we're going to do one pass. We'll do this thing again. I'm going to change the brightness as well, make it a little bit darker. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I feel like these stamps are super dark, and this textures are really bright, and so the transition between this contrast of light and dark looks really weird, and so I kind of want to fix that. So let's just go ahead and try one underneath of here, like this, at 45. Seems to be a bit much. Let's drop it down just a little bit more. I'm gonna undo. Let's go with 30. Okay. I'm gonna drop my size down. Okay. I'm just gonna do one pass first, underneath, just specifically the trees. I'm not gonna worry too much about the bushes, that's fine. It's the trees that really, in my mind, stick out the most. So let's go ahead and apply another one. Okay, yeah, the brown does help. I want to get some brown in there. So the transition is just too much, or not enough actually, sorry, not enough. Okay, and then also you're going to want to do some single clicks as well, just to break up that transition. All right, moving right along. We're almost done with this one, and then we'll kind of move on to the last one, which is rivers. Rivers are like one of my favorites, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll be sure to also post this this map in my, on my profile, so you can see this. That's going to be Mati. You find my stuff on the Explore page if you're not already following, so you can find me there. And also, I'll make sure to put a link to this map as well in the description below after the stream. I do think that the brown helped. This is not my favorite. There's some things about it that I don't care for, but overall, I think this works fairly well. And I'm sure if any of you have been following along, maybe you came up with a better version, but you get the general idea. It's just that a grassland, as the name says, more grass than there is really of things like trees and stuff like that. Again, you can add hills if you want. I sometimes just add single hills to give it a little bit more. So there's some minor elevation. I'm going to go ahead and save. We're at 433 changes. That's quite a bit. Okay. Okay. We're going to save, refresh, add that last bit. We've got 20 minutes, so that's perfect. I'm also going to refresh the page. With so many changes, the change log is probably huge. So we're going to have to end up, let's take a look. Oh my gosh, yeah, lots of changes here. So let's go ahead and just refresh the page. Oopsie, not that one, this one. Refresh the page a few times. Clear up that change log. Just, again, remember that when you're loading or saving a map in 4K editing, it will take a moment, so just be patient. All right, last biome. Yeah. Do some rivers. I already explained rivers just a tad in the mountain range, or I'm sorry, mountain lake. I did explain a little bit of how rivers work, but we'll do that same dynamic here. So when you're making your river, you should know where they start and where they end. Rivers have basically a travel, like to travel out to the ocean or large bodies of water, generally out to the ocean. They start in the mountains and what's called the headwaters. Your headwaters are a culmination of snow or ice melt, which accumulates in depressions in the mountain, as well as rainfall. Those fill up and then they spill out and go down the mountain out towards flat ground, and they generally go down elevation towards the ocean. So if you want to show an entire river starting from beginning to end, you're going to want to start with a mountain. Now, there generally isn't single mountains, but it is fantasy, so you just know that in fantasy you can have a small mountain. I think there's the Lonely Mountain in Tolkien's Lord of the Ring. Technically, that completely defies most physics, because mountains go in ranges. It's not very often that there's a single mountain, but you can have them. So just for fun, we're going to have one mountain. Not going to worry about making a range. You understand how it works. So we're going to do the same thing that we did here, right here, only we're going to have a river, a lake, or I'm sorry, a ocean. So you'll see where a river starts and where it ends. So let's just say that the ocean is over here. I'll make sure to paint that in. We're going to want to pick a color for the ocean. I'm just going to pick water blue. And we're going to want to switch over to BG, I think. Let's make sure. Nope, sorry, FG, my mistake. Okay, so this is, let's say this is your ocean right here. Like this. And I'm going to go ahead and use a different texture as well for the sand. Actually, let's go with this one. And we're going to drop the opacity, the softness. We're going to create just a little bit of a shoreline here. This. And in the next terrain video, I'll be sure to include FG and BG, because there are multiple ways to make bodies of water. If you want to paint them separately, you can by just using layers. If not, you can just texture it in. Like I said, for the purposes of this video, I had it specifically to where I'm using texturing. But for the future, if you want to know how to make a river with the add or subtract mode of the mask tool, that is absolutely possible. I'm just going to quickly show you that. Here, like this. Let's see, we don't want to use that. Actually, we want to use this brush. You always want to use your circle brush. If you're ever going to make a body of water or a river, don't ever use your edgy brush, because it's going to look super weird like this. I mean, that might work for a lake, but for a river, you're going to want to use your circle brush. I absolutely recommend that. Instead, your circle shape. And you're going to want to make the size be super small. Now, there are caveats when using the mask tool to make your rivers, and that is that you're going to have mask effects. Okay, so as you can see here, this right here is, you're going to see the outline effects, and you're going to go into your advanced settings of your mask options, and you can turn the stroke off if you want. So you can turn that stroke off, and you won't see any stroke. You'll also see that my line work is just completely gone as well. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to be making rivers, if you're going to be making a map where the rivers are super, super, super small, I don't even recommend using the add mode of the mask tool or the subtract tool of the mask mode. I actually recommend that you use paths. We did that in that first panel right here in second panel here, where we did these rivers here, because we wanted to be able to not have to flatten this stamp and then flatten all the surrounding stamps and then texture on top. Paths work better for small rivers, like on a world map, because you don't have to mess with all of the effects right here. And also, it might be so thin that you can't work with it, because the brush size is smaller. The path tool size width is smaller than the smallest size for the mask tool. So paths generally work better, in my opinion. Let's go ahead and undo this, but I just wanted to show you that. So let's go ahead and undo all this stuff. Okay, and we're going to want to go back to stroke because I kind of want to have these lines here. I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so we're going to go with the path tool. Oopsie, didn't want to do that. Undo that. Control Z. Okay, so I want to save the same settings as this path here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click it. And once I click that and I go over the path, it will save those exact same settings, except for the blend mode apparently. So that looks like that might be a bug. I believe it was hue. There we go. We're going to go with hue because we want the texture to blend in. So we're going to delete that. We're going to go over here and I'm going to create a lake up here in the mountains. And in fact, let's go with a mountain that has some snow on top of it. Oopsie. Object F, so O and then F key. Let's go with a snowy mountain instead because I want it to show that there's going to be snow melt. So let's place this one, and if you want you can add more in there if you want. Technically I just make it a range. I'm going to make these a bit smaller because these taller peaks, just as a rule of thumb with mountains, if you're going to have snow on one peak, you're probably going to want to put them on all. There are things to get around that if you want. For instance, we can go over, select this, open it up, go to advanced settings, transform, go to height, and you can boost that height up if you want. So that way it explains that, but it's up to you how you want to go about that. You can have snow on all of them, but for me, I'm just going to put it on this one because this is where the headwaters are going to be. And we're going to create a little lake, let's say right here, a little mountain lake, because there's this snow melt that goes down. Let's put a couple of them there. And then we're going to go ahead and drop down the size as well, because rivers are going to be tiny. Okay, so it goes down, and it's going to do all this meandering, remember that. And you can have long stretches too, like this, so have it really, really meander out. This is particularly to a world map. If you're making a regional map, obviously it would be much different, right? So I couldn't get all the way down there, so let's just connect it like this. Just all this meandering. There we go. Okay. Again, why do rivers meander? Again, it's because the sediment at the base or at the bottom, the light sediment that's not heavy rock, because moving water is only going to be able to push so much weight, and that depends on the force of the moving water. So meandering is caused by sediment, light sediment at the base or at the bottom of the rock bed of the river, where sediment is being pushed and eroding this bank, eroding this bank, going and eroding this bank. And so it's carving away at each bank. And so as the river gets older, as water flows through more, the river gets more and more and more S-shaped. Okay? So you want to absolutely have meandering in your rivers if you want to make them look realistic. That's at least how it works with physics on Earth. So, and if you want your map to look more realistic, obviously you're going to want to use the physics of Earth. If you're using the physics of something else that you invented, then you're going to want to keep in mind and let users know that physics as well. I know that we have some people who are very particular about rivers. So it's really just a matter of personal preference. Keep in mind that your rivers are a matter of personal preference. And this is how I do it with small rivers, is I use the path tool. Using the subtract mode is a bit too much. If you look at one size here, it's about the same size, a bit wider. But as you can see with a stroke on, the stroke is so wide you can't even see it. Like if I was to move the stroke down to say something smaller, you might be able to see. We'll just drop the stroke down. This line is going to get a little bit thinner. As you can see when I zoom in, you can see the stroke line. You can actually see inside. You can even drop it down even more. So for me, as you can see, here's the difference, right, between the path tool method and the subtract mode. So, but just know that when you're using paths, you're going to have to use a blend mode that works, obviously, because if you go out into the water here, I can even kind of see it a little bit, but it's okay. That's all right. But the path tool is what you want to use for these short, very, very small, zoomed out world maps. Let's go ahead and fix that problem. I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to go over it with the add mode. Okay. So that's basically how your river is going to work. And let's make a couple of them and follow the same steps so people understand. Let's go ahead and click this. And we're going to put a bunch more together, and we're going to show that rivers actually will connect into each other. So let's continue the mountain chain and add some more rivers that connect into this, because that's generally what happens with rivers, is the other rivers that go from headwaters connect. So let's go ahead and do that. So you'll have like another lake that comes, or I'm sorry, another river that connects into here like that. And you'll have another river that, let's say, goes in like this. This is pretty normal. Rivers often connect into each other like this, that go out. Okay, so this main one connects, and generally as they connect, the river gets slightly bigger. So you can add, like, let's say you want it to be a bit bigger, you know, making it bigger here like this. That's up to you, really, but they do get bigger because you're connecting those waters together, right? So there's that, and also there are tributaries. A tributary is a part of a river that doesn't actually connect, it goes off. So like if I was to connect like this, it just goes, and it doesn't connect into any other body of water like this. So we're adding these here and there. Okay, so you're just adding them here and there. That looks all right. Okay, so you're going to have little tributaries like that. And I also want to discuss one other thing too that would be interesting to understand about rivers. I don't know if anyone's heard of an oxbow lake. An oxbow lake is tied in with a river. An oxbow lake is where you have a bend or a meander like this. I'm going to quickly put one together so you can see it. Let's increase my size. That looks about the right size. Okay, an oxbow lake. So here's, let's say this is your S-shape to your river, right? Okay, so here's your river right here. And then you apply, let's say that you do this, like this, okay? And an oxbow lake is when the flow of water to a river dries up. So if I was to remove it like this is your oxbow lake, okay? So it's basically what happens is this flow of water gets cut off to this section right here, and then, but the impression in the ground remains, and the water dries up, and you create this kind of U shape. And if I'm correct, it's called an oxbow lake, and those look really nice. You can add them in here if you want to. I can connect them. Since we're using a U, it's really nice because what happens is you won't overlap the paths. They kind of blend together, so that's nice. We're going to put that here. Another nice thing about paths is that you can edit them, so I can change the size unlike a texture. So I can drop this, make this as big or as small as I want. I'm going to put maybe an oxbow lake there, copy, paste, maybe put one here like this because a river just kind of dried up and created an oxbow. Let's just flip it around, put it over here on this side like this. Okay. So keep all that in mind. Oxbow lakes are like one of my favorite things. Hey, White, great to see you. All right. I'm actually just about to end, and I apologize. So, but just know that you can, I'll be ending here pretty soon. So, but I'm going to quickly finish up this river stuff. And remember that this stream is recorded. So all you have to do is just go back and watch this for if there's anything you missed. And I'll be sure to give a little bit more warning in advance for streams so that people will be ready. So we just went over rivers, how they operate, where they start. I'm just going to quickly review that and then finish up this panel so it at least looks nice, or increase its size so that it takes up more space. But rivers start, it's called their headwaters. They start in the mountains. I know this is repetitive, so for people who are new, this will be new to you. The headwaters of rivers start in the mountains. It's an accumulation of rainfall and snow melt or ice melt those create what's called the headwaters. They pool up and then they go down the mountain and hit towards a flat ground, and they meander their way out to the ocean. Okay, and they can split and branch. They don't split and branch very often, but they can. I know there's some contention over that question, whether or not a river splits. Yes, it does. It's not a common occurrence in nature, but it does happen. So just to put that out there, let's go ahead and finish up this last bit of landscape here. I'm going to go ahead and change some of the textures and blend in some stuff so that it looks good. Let's go ahead and get that started. Let's go ahead and pick the texture we want. And next time I'm going to remind myself to favorite land that I'm using, because then I have to look for it every single time, and that's kind of a pain. This is grass brown. I'm just going to favorite it. And we're going to do that same thing. We're going to use this edgy brush. The edgy brush, again, for those of you who are new here, works absolutely perfect for blending. So, but you are going to want to drop the opacity down, because at 100%, the transition is super rough. You don't want to do that. So you're going to want to drop the opacity down. And again, you're going to want to test it out to see what looks good. I'm just going to put them around the base of this mountain. It's okay if you overlap the water part. That's quite all right. I'm going to drop the opacity, or drop the size down and do another pass. Just want these sections to be a bit darker where it connects. Okay. And we're going to want to drop the opacity, or the size, down to even smaller. Just put single clicks like this. Okay. Again, all for transition. The edgy brush is the savior. The edgy brush is great for transitions. That's why I like using it. Don't see that a lot of people do. In fact, I actually don't use it that much, and I probably should, even though I'm telling you to use it. I guess it's just habits, right? Okay, so we blended those stamps in, and we're going to want to add some green. So let's go ahead and pick a green texture that we want. Let's see what we got here. Pick something different. Let's say this grass mixed. I'm going to increase the size. And be careful, because this is not on a different layer. So when you're adding that texture in, just be careful. Okay, there we go. And if the river doesn't work, if those rivers don't work well for you with that texture, you can always change that up. Go to your selection options. First, you want to press escape. Don't want anything selected. Click the path. So how this works is that if you select one when all are selected, it will select that one. And then single click, or you can just click all to turn them on and off. I'm just going to click the path because this works out well. And I'm going to select all my paths. So all my paths are selected, and you can actually change the color too if you want. So just going to go with maybe a darker, if it'll work. I'm not sure. Let's take a look. Because I do have a different blend mode on. No, I think that's fine. Okay. Is there a shadow involved? There isn't. Good. Maybe add a yellow shadow. I'm not sure. Sometimes you might want to play with things. It just depends. I don't even see it. I think it's because that blend mode doesn't allow it. So then the last steps now are just to kind of decorate this area here. And I'm going to be using a series of vegetation to do so. I really enjoyed demoing those, so that was nice. Let's go ahead and add some hills. I think that would be kind of nice. I'm going to put them kind of randomly around so it kind of looks like they're going around these hills a bit. We're going to do that. And again, I'll probably change the blend mode of those hills. Just going to add one currently with the shapes that they're at. And actually, I should keep them closer to the mountain and away. Oopsie. Control Z that. I actually just wanted to select the hill, if it will allow me to do that. Actually, I think it's because of that. There we go. Perfect. All right. Go ahead and add in this hill. And with these ones, I want to change the blend mode to luminosity so it kind of blends in with that texture. And we might even have to change things up with contrast a bit. Let's drop the contrast down. This one can be brown because it's close up to the hills or the mountains, so that's fine. I'm not going to worry about that. Okay. All right, so we've added that. Now let's add some trees. That's going to be some trees in here, smallest size. These are rather large trees, but that is okay. You can drop them down in size, but for me, I'm not going to worry about that. And you're going to want to make sure that the trees are obviously a layer above the river path, so that way it doesn't accidentally have the path, there we go, in front of it. So you want the trees to be in a layer above. And I'm just going to place them around. Technically these trees are absolutely massive, so I will rescale them. Don't worry about that. For now, I'm just going to place them all down at once, and then we can rescale them. Again, remember that if you do rescale trees below this 10 mark, they might not turn out great on export. So just keep that in mind, that you've gone to the limits of the tool. So I'm going to select all these deciduous trees that I've selected here. Oops, there we go. I think it's all these ones. Okay. Oh yeah, so if you want to select multiple items, you can, I believe, hold down the shift key, click one first at the bottom or at the top, hold shift, click the top, and it will select all of those. And I'm going to go ahead and just drop these down like this. I'll have to remove them, obviously. That's fine. I don't mind removing them, but they should be probably even smaller than that. Because if you look at the size of the rivers, they are absolutely tiny. So let's go ahead and do that. It's okay. There we go. It should keep that same size. That's fine. Oh, nope, it did not keep that size. So it looks like it goes back up to 10. Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. Okay. All right. So we've got our trees here. We've got our mountains. And for the last bit, we're just going to add some grass texture here. I don't want to make too much biome here. I just wanted to explain river. So I'm just going to add some textures, and then we're going to wrap it up. Just going to add some grass. Sorry for cutting it short and not making this last panel quite as decorative as nice as the others. I just wanted to explain how rivers work. Okay, we're going to go ahead and save this, and we are reaching the end. We just to answer a question in the chat, we actually don't have a roadmap for stamps, and we do have a logical framework for that. We're fearful of setting deadlines for our team members because we don't want to pressure people to get art done quickly. That sometimes diminishes the quality of the art. So by not adding a roadmap, we're kind of keeping the sanity of our artists. So maybe when we get more artists, a roadmap would be more appropriate, but we don't want to put too much pressure and strain on our team. We have a very, very, very small team. We're not very many of us, so roadmaps right now where we are with the configuration of our team and tasks does not make sense, but maybe that would be a possibility in the future. People have been asking questions about roadmaps, and I do think it's something that we might want to consider addressing, but not until we address some other issues first, as in getting more developers, getting more artists, and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. And I'm going to go ahead and just off-screen or off-stream finish up the land masses here, and then I'll make this available on my profile for you to clone and edit and to go over it. And I hope that you all found the template that I used here and will try to had tried to follow along to it, because I want you guys to practice as much as possible. Because the reason why I chose with terrain is because terrain is the most important thing really on a map, because when you're building your structures or POIs, it's all built around terrain. So understanding terrain, where it goes on your map, how to make it in the tool will also help you with making cities, help you making an interior for our tavern. Because if you don't understand landscape, terrain, and biomes, then you won't know what structures to put where and everything like that. So terrain is super important. I'll be doing more streams this month on terrain, so keep that in mind. I forgot which style the next one's going to be in, but I do have a calendar up, so go check that on our Discord. And we'll go ahead and end this stream. I appreciate everyone who could make it for the stream, and for all the future watchers, I hope you enjoy it. And I'll see you guys next time for the next stream. One more thing, also keep in mind that tomorrow we'll be releasing a video on the brush tool. There's an old brush tool video that's also on our channel. We're going to delete that video, so the new one that's updated, because we're constantly updating and improving the tool, improving the art. We're also going to have to upgrade the video. So expect a new video tomorrow, 10 a.m. PDT, okay? Thank you again for making it. I hope you enjoyed the stream, and I hope it helped. Don't forget to subscribe, click that like button, and to hit the notification bell if you want to see future videos. And if you have suggestions for future videos, please put them in the description below, or I'm sorry, in the comments below, okay? Thank you so much. Merry map making, and stay safe and healthy, everybody.